available to everybody. We're going to start our webinar, long-awaiting webinar. Here is we have some guests and our faculties and also our chairperson. These figures don't need any introduction. Still, for the sake of our formality, I'm going to introduce our chairperson also and our panelist. Our chairperson is our director of the National Institute of Cardiovascular Disease, our eminent professor. He's a very renowned intervention cardiologist for Bangladesh, Professor Mir Jamaluddin, sir. Sir, good evening. Assalamu alaikum, sir. How are you? Fine, sir. Sir, recently, sir has been he has been suffering from COVID-19. Now she is recovering. Now I think sir is fine and is a good health. And I won't go further any introduction for you. Everybody know you as well. And sir has got some experience with renal artery stenosis. He got some. We have some opportunity to work with him. So that's why I think he can contribute also, not only chairperson, also with this experience. And now our keynote speaker, our eminent pediatric cardiologist, who is I think is our beacon of light. She's our friend. He's a philosopher, your guide, everything else. The long path of your pediatric cardiology arena has been introduced by herself by in the 19th, I think long about 20 or 25 years back. So she had some huge experience in this field. We are thankful to her. Recently, our government has blessed her with Shadhinata Padak, is the highest some prize to her for her activity, for her contribution in this field. Not only this field, she got a lot of philanthropic works. It got some charitable works with her. We are thankful to her, madam, that she has given us the time to discuss such a I think interesting case. And then I'll go for Nageshwar Rao. He is also known to us. He is very much an active person, and he is very person for his innovative discovery in this field. I'll give my thanks to Nageshwar Rao because I give him short notice, and he responded real well. I think he's also our friend, philosopher, and guide. Every time when your Pediatric Society asks him for any kind of academic session, he responded. I'm grateful to him. This time I think this is just arena. I opened the arena. I think in this COVID situation, in the webinar, we'll go for frequent webinar. We need your assistance. We need your guidance. I think Nageshwar Rao sir will come to us. So next and the last, another person. He is another renowned personality. This is Mazwin Alvi. He is a very renowned person. Whenever I go for, I'm searching for stent implantation. I'm searching the internet network. There's innumerable works of Mazwin Alvi. He's the master of these things. So we have the opportunity to have some, I think, exchange of views, to have some experience with such great personalities. So I won't take time. So everybody, good evening. And now I'm going to, with the permission of our chairperson, I'm going to ask my Madam Noor Fatima, Professor Noor Fatima, Madam. He is the professor of our two grant institute, one Armed Forces Military Hospital and another is our Kurmital Hospital. This grant institute, she's the chief of pediatric cardiology and pediatric department. So, Madam, I ask you your favor to just give your speech. Thank you very much, Madam.
Thank you, Dr. Shahriar. Dear Nageshwar Rao, Mir Jamaluddin, and all senior teachers and my dear colleagues who are in the webinar today, welcome to you all. Actually, I am very unprepared today. Yesterday, Dr. Shahriar, he called me when I was in a meeting, and he was telling, ma'am, can you tell something about stent? I said, let me check with my PA if there is any presentation ready in the computer. Then I called my PA and he said, I am seeing one of the presentation writing stenting. I said, there must be something stenting. Okay, you tell Dr. Shahriar that I will present a paper. Then I came home at night. A computer was in office. Then I told them to send it. and then I didn't found that much of the thing there. Actually, those are few cases only. And today I had a charity program. I did 8 interventions since morning up to 2 o'clock. I was busy. So I did 3 ASD, 3 PDA, 1 balloon, and another I could not remember. So after finishing all those, I came at 2 o'clock, and then I took 1 hour, and I could not save. I don't know what happened to the computer. I finished everything, then I found nothing was saved, and I'm so upset. And since then, I am having severe headache because I was upset, and because of that. So anyways, I will try to share with you whatever I have prepared now in 5 minutes. So this is a very quick one, simple presentation. I got only 5 to 10 minutes at the end to recover some of the things from the deleted one. So the topic says stenting in congenital heart disease. You are seeing the stent in the picture inside a vessel, and balloon catheter is inside to inflate the stent. And those who are working, like our respectable director of the NICVD, they are very much acquainted with the stent because their main job is coronary arteries, and main job is to dilate the coronary arteries. So if we see
we can't see your computer. We can't see your computer. We are only seeing you.
Oh, you are not seeing computer? I am sharing.
We are not seeing your presentation. Can you please share your presentation? Thank you.
Right.
Okay,
right.
I am again sharing.
Welcome.
Yes. Slide share.
We're not getting your
Yes.
presentation.
Yes.
Yes. Yes,
You are
ma'am.
seeing
Yeah.
now?
Yeah, ma'am. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is the stent inside the vessel, and I was telling that Professor Mir Jamaluddin, they are very much expert in placing stent in the coronary arteries, and they are expert. So this is the, if we see longitudinally, this is the one, and then if we see from inside, this is from the inner view, and this is a closed cell type of the stent, and this is actually inside the coronary arteries. So if you search for the stent, you will get only the coronaries, because congenital are not yet that much familiar, and in the net you will not find that much of the photograph.
Madam, you are going to present any slide for the stent? We don't get any view on or angiographic view. Only the only your.
You are not seeing the slide.
Slide.
We are seeing the slides, but we are not seeing the respective slides synchronous to your talk. We are seeing only like stent choices stents are used in, but not the description which you are giving. Probably you can sync it and then go to PowerPoint presentation.
Can you see one of the slide now writing introduction?
No, madam. No, madam. No, the slide is presenting is the stent choices stents are used. That things. It is, I think, the slide number 14 or 13, maybe not in the initial slide.
What are you seeing now?
Same thing.
Are you seeing any stent?
No, madam.
No. We see text only, no pictures.
It is slide number 11 out of 41. Out of 41, slide number 11. You go, I think should start from the first slide. It's number 11 slide.
Yeah, I'm going to the first slide again.
Yes.
Okay, madam.
Press F5, then you can start your first slide.
এটাতে আনো না, স্লাইডে আনো, স্লাইডটা কিছু বুঝলো না।
Yes, ma'am. You are going to open your second slide. Is the second slide? Yes, ma'am.
This is the second one now.
Right, ma'am.
I suggest you can go to PPT, directly play that. Go to PPT. Yeah.
Now you are seeing?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the inner view of the closed cell type of the stent, And this one you are seeing now, right?
Yes, yes, madam.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So this is the coronary artery stent. So all of you are aware of these things from that. Now,
Introduction.
so balloon expandable intravascular stent, huh?
Yes. Also fine.
তুমি কি করছো? There is some problem here. Just a minute.
What you can do is, once you go to presentation, lower down you have arrows.
Yeah, this never happened to me, but today computer is not actually working. All my presentation was deleted, and now whatever I could recover, now I am facing problem. So
Okay.
balloon expandable intravascular stents have been used to support vessel wall in coronaries and peripheral vessels in adults. Nowadays, intravascular or intracardiac stents are used in many fields of congenital lesions also. These are peripheral branch pulmonary artery stenosis, RVOT stenting, PDA stenting, coarctation stenting, dilatation of the previously placed conduits by the surgeon. So these are the main fields where we pediatric cardiologists, we are using stent. And some of these stents are performed for the life-saving purpose. For example, atrial septal stenting, PDA stenting. So if we go to the history for a brief history, in 1969, Daughter and someone said Judkins also first introduced the technique for the non-operative placement of the tubular coiled nitinol wire stent. Since then, several self and balloon expandable stents have been introduced, all with the intent of maintaining the luminal patency, usually in conjunction with the balloon angioplasty. Stents usually they provide effective and predictable relief of the obstruction. So whether it is an adult patient or a pediatric patient, our main aim is to relieve the obstruction or to create a almost closed natural way, like closing PDA, like closing ASD or patent foramen ovale. And it can do it by, this stent can do it by exerting radial force and preventing the recoil of the stent. So what are the advantages of a stent? To maintain a pathway, it relieves the intravascular or intracardiac obstruction. So obstruction may be inside any of the vessel, like coronary vessel, like pulmonary artery, like pulmonary vein, like systemic vein. So any of the vein or artery, very common one is renal artery. And then treatment of the extensive vessel dissection. Sometime during some procedure, there is vessel dilation or a spontaneous vessel dissection in adults, or sometime after some interventional procedure. So covered stent can help actually closing those dissections. And sometime also aneurysm, to minus the aneurysm part from the circulation, we can also use a stent or stent graft. Stent graft is usually used by the surgeons and effective in long segment stenosis also. We know that balloon angioplasty is not helpful in long segment stenosis, but we can place a stent for the long segment stenosis even. So what are the indications? If we broadly see the indications, first one is the expansion of the narrow vessels, which I have mentioned. So the basal may be an artery, basal may be a vein. So these are the branches, or the even main pulmonary artery. Sometimes we do stenting if there is adequate length, and then branch systemic or pulmonary veins. Then we can place the stent for expansion of the narrow channels like right ventricular outflow tract. This is a very common intervention nowadays, especially in small children with tetralogy of Fallot, with double outlet right ventricle, with tetralogy of Fallot type physiology. Then patent ductus arteriosus. Then sometimes we actually enlarge the MEPCAs or narrow part of the MEPCA or constriction of the MEPCA by placing the stent. Then expansion of the narrow hole. Sometimes the small ASD or PFO in some life-saving cases, like tricuspid atresia, pulmonary atresia cases, there is hypoplastic RV, and only way is the atrial septum, the ASD or the PFO, or in some cases of total anomalous pulmonary venous drainage, aged is very small or almost closed. So in those cases, we can place a stent in the atrial septum. And if we need some time, for example, in our country, our surgeons, they usually don't do very high risk cases. So we need some time to send them to our neighboring countries. And mostly we send our patient to India, our friend Nageshwar Rao's country. So we need to stabilize them for the time being, to process the visa, to manage money. And you know, most of the patients are poor, so they need some time actually. So in those cases, sometime we place stent in the atrial septum also. And sometime we place the stent in the ventricular septum. I did these kind of cases in 4 or 5 occasions in tricuspid atresia situation where the patient was very poor. He could not manage money for doing surgery and going to abroad. And then his VSD was very small, which was maintaining the pulmonary circulation. So in that situation, I placed a stent in the ventricular septum across the VSD up to the pulmonary artery. And with these palliative methods, they are still surviving. I did up to, like my last case I did in 2016. So these 4 or 5 patients, they are still alive and they are still actually, they are still managing money to go for the further surgery. And then treatment of the aortic aneurysm dissection I have mentioned. So these are the broad indications. In actually the first 3 are in children, and last one, the aortic aneurysm, this is actually more common in the adult population, and most of the surgeons, they place endovascular stent in this situation, known as stent graft. Dissection sometimes happen to us during doing coarctation stenting with the bare metal stent. In those cases, we always keep a covered stent in our shelf to actually bail out from that situation. So stent choice, how can you select your stent? There are 2 kinds of stent if we consider about the delivery mechanism. So one is balloon expandable and another is self-expanding stent. So we usually commonly use balloon expandable type of stents because balloon expandable type of stent, they have the opportunity to increment of the size later on with the growth of the child. So we know that we are dealing with the children and they will grow to adult ultimately. Now, if I place a small stent, then when the child will grow, the stent will not grow. Now, work is going on now to prepare now biodegradable stent, which will degrade in course of time. But till today, we are actually using stents which are not biodegradable. And that's why we usually prefer balloon expandable stent, so that in future, if required, we can actually increase the size of the stent by using a higher size balloon. And self-expandable stents, these are infrequently used in pediatric practice. And this is because of the limitation of expansion, scope of expansion later on. And the radial stent, you know, it is a self-expandable, very soft type of the stent, and its radial strength is also not that much like that of the balloon expandable. So we usually don't use that much. Now, self-expanding stent, they are very flexible, they are low profile, cannot be crushed, and they conform to even to the carved vessel because they are very flexible and soft, and they are made of nitinol or cobalt chromium alloy. So nitinol is also an alloy, you know, it is composed of nickel and titanium. So these are very soft metal and they are very flexible and they have less radial strength. Now, balloon expandable stent, they allow further expansion with growth. So if you use a balloon of 14 millimeter, with growth, you can go up to 18 millimeter, 20 millimeter, 22 millimeter, if the stent allows up to that much diameter, and then maintain the radial strength at large diameter. So radial strength is good in this kind of stent, and they are low profile for use in smaller children. They are also flexible. Retrievability is good, and access to the side also good. I will go to the classification of the stent later on, but there is a while I retrieve the slide numbers actually upside down. So Some stents are small size stents, some are medium size, some are large. So for the time being, you know that up to 10 to 12 millimeter is the medium size, and we use this medium size especially for the renal artery, branch pulmonary arteries, and some of the veins where the caliber is like 10 to 12 millimeter. So there are designs of the stent also. So your selection of the stent will depend sometime on the stent design. Now some of the stent, they are of the slotted tube. So I'm sorry, I have missed the picture of the slotted tube. It is actually tube, and then they cut it in a way that the tube is converted into a stent by some mechanism. And then there are some closed cell design and open cell design. Here actually a rod like usually a rod like thing is used, and then it is welded in some place. In closed cell, it is welded in every place to give a cell design, but in open cell, it is not connected in all places. Sometimes 2-3 cells coalesce together and form a big cell. So if you want to know the closed cell design example, these are actually the old Palmes stent, and their latest generation now is the Genesis. And open cell are actually, these are the large stents, Intrastent, Mega LD, Maxi LD, EV3. These are the open cell design. There are some stents which are hybrid type, mixing of closed and open cell. And one of these is the Endra. You know, the Endra is a very good stent at the latest generation hybrid stent, and it is available with the extra large size also. And there are other like CP stent, which is covered with the picture, the photo. This one is the CP stent, and this is a PTFE membrane covered with it, and you have to deliver this with the beep balloon. So this is I think all of you know this one. This is an aortic valve, and this is a self-expandable stent. You are seeing how fine this one. So these are this kind of stent. They have less radial stent, but these are very soft, flexible. So this is one of the CP stent I have shown you earlier. You have to cream this stent over the balloon. Over this beep balloon is good. Beep balloon allow you to get a good longitudinal strength and longitudinal expansion of the stent. So this is one of the stent, bare metal. You are seeing here that sometimes these are not connected. These are not connected, and here this is connected, not connected. So this is one design, but in some stent you will see that all cells are connected with each other. So these are the closed cell type. This one is closed cell. You are seeing all are connected. So this is a very good stent with good radial strength. Now, which one is the ideal stent for the congenital heart disease? As our children are, very small, their body weight is very less. So we must choose a low profile one with high trackability, high flexibility, which can negotiate the curve. If we face any curve, then it must have good radio opacity so that we can see it in the screen. It must be MRI compatible and predictable expansion. For example, I want to expand it up to 4 millimeter, and for that foreshortening is maybe 1 or 2 millimeter. So that should be predictable. I must know from before that my stent will expand up to this and it will foreshorten up to this. So it should we should know our limit. Then sufficient radial strength so that it can hold. It must have the scaffolding strength to hold the vessel, and then it should have low rigidity and less material fatigue with time. These stents are made of some metals, either steel or with some alloys. So this metal must not face fatigue in course of time. And then resistance to thrombus formation. This is very important. You are placing a stent, and then if there is thrombus formation on next day or within 1 month or 2 months, then it is not helpful for the patient, neither helpful for you nor helpful for the patient. So we usually use many drug against the thrombus formation, but some of the low quality stent, they are very thrombogenic. So you have to be careful about the stent quality. And we must have to avoid neo-intimal proliferation inside the stent. And then if the stent, if it is possible to redilate it later on, that will be very good, because we know that the child will grow in course of time. And round and soft is to avoid intimal damage. The start should be round, soft, and wide start to maintain the blood flow, especially in the jailed vessel. So if the start or the segments are large, if some vessel is jailed, then in those cases, blood flow will be maintained through this start to the jailed vessel. This happens actually in arch of the aorta. If sometimes subclavian artery or any of the major vessel, you know the arch of the aorta is a dangerous part. Two carotid vessels and the subclavian vessels are coming out. So we should not jail them. But if we jail, then we should do something. We should enlarge the start there, or should place another stent through the start, so that the blood flow to the important structures of the upper part of the body should not be jeopardized. So we can classify the stent in various ways. I have mentioned earlier that by delivery mechanism, we can classify them as balloon expandable or self-expanding. And then on the basis of materials, stainless steel, then cobalt chromium. This is very good. Cobalt chromium is very good especially for the children. Then CP, Chitam platinum. You know, this is the composition of the platinum and with iridium. Iridium is only 10%, platinum is 90%. And the joining point, here there is some gold welding also. And biodegradable stent, they are actually the polymer of the magnesium and biocorrodable iron. We have not yet get any opportunity to use this kind of stent yet. And based on the size, I have mentioned earlier that small stent for the small vessels like coronary arteries, 2 to 6 millimeters, then medium up to 10 to 12, then large stent up to 18, and extra large stent up to 25. This extra large we actually use in the RBOT or RBOT stenting during pulmonary valve implantation or in the aorta, and large stent also used in the aorta and pulmonary arteries in children. So these things I have mentioned earlier. Now, aim of stenting in CHD. So what are the main aim of doing stent in congenital heart disease? One is relief stenosis, another is negotiate aneurysm, another is to deal with the dissection, and another is to maintain the patency of the newly established or existing tracts or channel. So which one is the newly established? Like we place a conduit, or like double barrel repair in case of the tetralogy of Fallot. So sometimes we place conduit to communicate between the right ventricle and the pulmonary artery, especially in case of Rastelli type repair. So this is a newly established tract. Sometimes there is stenosis in this tract, or there is non-functioning of the conduit. In those cases, we have to place stent, and valve are actually the stent. These are the stented valve. So these are one kind of stent. And existing tract, I have mentioned that PDA or ASD or VSD or BEPCA, these are the existing tract, but they are narrowed, and then we have to open those for the sake of the patient. Now after this, I will show you some of the cases. Actually, I could not add new cases. These are from the old presentation. As I said, I could not find any time to actually insert. So this is a PDA stenting which was done for life-saving purpose in a baby of 2 days. His saturation was only 4%. So we had started prostaglandin, and you are seeing now there in the pulmonary end. Here is the pulmonary end of the PDA. So aortic end is very big, but in the pulmonary end, you are seeing that it is almost closed. So we place a stent here on urgent basis. And this is the mechanism. This is from the retrograde approach. You are seeing that how narrow this part is. So this is a very narrow, almost closed. Now we are actually dilating it with the balloon. And this is the stent after placement. So you are seeing how big this opening is now. And this is another child, his name is Akif, 19 days old, pulmonary atresia with VSD and PDA. So he was having frequent cyanotic spell on prostaglandin 0.1 microgram per kg per minute. And we went to the cath lab with this child because his saturation was dropping, and it was we were maintaining it with the prostaglandin. So you know that prostaglandin is a very toxic drug. We should discontinue it as early as possible because it can cause necrotizing enterocolitis, it can cause apnea, and many other like renal failure. So in this case, you are seeing that we are in the middle point. This is the narrowed point, and our stent, middle part of the stent is here. And this is this child weight was 2.5 kg, so we use a 3 millimeter. So our cutoff point of weight is 2.5 kg. 2.5 kg or less we use 3, and more than 2.5 we use 3.5 to 4 millimeter in the neonate, if it is a maintenance of the pulmonary circulation. But if you do the stent for maintaining systemic circulation, then we use larger size. So the Akif, after doing first stenting, what happened? There was, you are seeing here, there is thrombus formation. In spite of heparinization and everything, it was actually narrowed down, and then we actually brought him to the cath lab again, and this is the placement of the second stent. And after the second stent, it was fine. So you have to monitor the patient in the ICU very closely, because stents, sometimes it is very common that PDA stent may close, or sometimes the flow of blood through the stent is so much that patient developed heart failure within a very short time. So you have to check and balance between the flow through the stent and the flow to the lungs, so that there should not be too much flow, which can cause heart failure, or too less flow, which may need another stent. So this is another patient with the RBOT stenting. This patient was spilling. So you are seeing this child, only 3 kg, 7-month-old in the ICU. So she was ICU bound since her 3 months of age, and I referred her to all the surgeons available in the country, but no one agreed to do any BT-shunt because her weight was very less and she was too much cyanose. So they said it is a very high risk case, and I could not get any opportunity to refer her to our neighboring countries because her condition was critical and she was not fit for any journey. So what I did, I took permission from the father, and I took her to the cath lab. And then you are seeing here how tight this RBOT. If you notice, this RBOT is almost closed. So this is the stent. This was a 7 by 12, I think 7 by 12 millimeter Genesis stent, peripheral stent. So after the stenting, you are seeing this one is open. Now you should not place a too big stent here, because you know these patients are having large VSD. If you place a big stent, these patients will develop heart failure. So there should be a balance, and we will allow a balanced flow to the pulmonary artery so that there will be no swell, and at the same time there should not be any heart failure also from the too much flow. So this is a patient with cerebral abscess, and she was having convulsion, meningitis. No surgeon was taking her, considering her situation. She was having fever for 3 months and a very, very critical case. So once she was afebrile for 7 days, and taking that opportunity of afebrile period of 7 days, I took her to the cath lab. And when I took her to the cath lab, our sister, she said, we don't have stent of 6 or 7 millimeter. I knew that these stents are available, but as I was trapped, I told her to bring the stent, and she was telling, I don't have this one. So I said, I have to do something, give me some coronary stent. So I used coronary, and after doing the case, I went to the shelf and I found those stents. Anyways, as I was doing with the coronary stent, I had to use 3 stents in this girl, one after another. So this one is moving. So this is one of, I'm doing PTCA balloon actually. It was so tight. So first I did some balloon dilatation. Later on I placed the place 3 stents one after another. So these videos are not moving. Sorry. Now this is a stenting in the coarctation of aorta. It was a covered stent. 8 years old girl, 18 kg. Our cutoff point of weight is 15 kg or more, and we place at 12 by 29 covered CP stent to this girl. Actually, I had no time to check whether these were moving or not. So sorry, I could not check this from before. This is the CP stent you were seeing. So it was creamed on a beep balloon, and you can see the marker of the balloon, and you have to place the stent nicely so that it should not be overlap the balloon in this way or in that way. And this is the coarctation stenting with Advanta. So that one with the CP stent, and this is with the Advanta. This child had PDA device closure in his very early infancy, like at the age of 1 month, he was having very large PDA with mild coarctation at that time, and he was in frank heart failure. So at that time, we did PDA device closure, and with that, he was doing fine up to 4 years of age. When he came to us at 4 years follow-up, we found that there is some, at that time, balloon angioplasty for coarctation was done also with this device. So in neonatal period, he had double intervention of balloon angioplasty and also PDA device closure. But in the last follow-up of 4 years, we found that again there is some coarctation. So this time we thought his weight was 10 kg. So we use an Advanta which is redilatable. So we use a balloon up to 12 millimeter, and it will go up to 16 to 18 millimeter when he will grow up. So here you are seeing that the upper end of the device also here. So we are trying to dilate that, and this is the view after implantation of the stent. So there is no obstruction and it is well placed. And this is one of the pulmonary valve replacement. And here also, this is also the use of stent in congenital heart disease. So in this child, we place actually, firstly we dilate the conduit with the balloon. Then we place a covered stent of 39 millimeter, but it was not a good landing station. The conduit was actually uncovered. Some part of the conduit was uncovered and it was calcified. So there was a chance actually the stent fracture of the melody valve. That's why we used another 34 millimeter to cover the full length, and then we placed the melody of 18 with an 18 millimeter ensemble. So you are seeing here that there is free pulmonary regurgitation, and interestingly, there is no left pulmonary artery in this child, and there is RPA origin stenosis. So we did this. We negotiated the RPA stenosis with the balloon, and then we placed. And this case was done in 2012, and now 2020. This patient is doing very fine. His RPA is fully open. His valve is functioning very nicely. There is no valve dysfunction. There is no stenosis. So you can see this is the result of the stent, the valve implantation. There is no pulmonary regurgitation. This is a multi-purpose catheter, and there is no pulmonary valve regurgitation. This is the stent preparation you are seeing here. So this valve, it has two sides. One is threaded with the blue color and another. So you will get an idea how to connect it with the ensemble delivery system. This is another child, Rukaiya, with the valve, and you are seeing here our stenos conduit. Here we use two stent also. So this is the first stent. This is a CP stent. This is another CP stent, and this is the valve. So last one, first two are the CP stent. With the beep balloon, we are deploying. So this is the deployment of the second one. So there is a long landing zone is created for the safe landing of the valve. So this valve is going now inside. And this is actually a few days ago, there was embolization of an ADO2 from the BSD, and then we actually captured it. This is the actually not relevant to this today's talk, but it was in my presentation, which I could not edit actually. So this one you are seeing here, and this is coming out now. So I am very sorry that I could not give you a very good presentation because of lack of time. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Madam, you told us that you got some minimum slides, but you got extensive works, very detailed works, and it's a beautiful presentation. Last slide that about the pulmonary valve placement. So I think a lot of things we learn from you, the how to balance the defect when we have some large VSD and PDA, and how to place the stent, the size of the stent. Madam, there is no question in our bank, but still I got some query, but that can ask you to kindly answer me. When we will cease prostaglandin therapy prior to stenting? This is my question, number one. And diaphragm stent, how much bigger you can consider to avoid stent migration? Madam, two questions from me.
Can you repeat, please? First one is what is prostaglandin? What?
Well, when will cease the prostaglandin therapy prior to stenting? When you will stop
when we stop? Oh yeah.
Right.
Actually, when we were doing this in early like 2004-5, we were stopping the prostaglandin 1 hour before the procedure. But then we found that when the patient they go to reach cath lab, they again become cyanosed. They again actually we were feeling that the prostaglandin make the PDA fragile, so there will be chance of bleeding or some complications. So we were worried about continuing prostaglandin in the cath lab, and then we used to stop those 1 to 2 hours before taking the patient to the cath lab. But nowadays we are seeing that if we stop prostaglandin, then actually, and sometimes it happens that prostaglandin enlarge the PDA too much. So you need a large stent to actually place there. So that was one of the reasons also to close the prostaglandin from before. But some of our experience, we learned that if we stop prostaglandin, then PDA again start closing. And it happens so rapidly that we again face some problems. So nowadays what we do, we actually reduce the dose little bit, but we don't close them fully. We don't stop them fully. Suppose if it is 0.01 microgram, then we have the dose in the infusion pump, but we continue it until we finish the case. So this is our protocol nowadays. And about your second question, what is the diameter you say?
Madam, for how much the diameter will consider to avoid stent migration? To stent migration, how much if you go for larger stent, how much big stent? Then
actually for PDA stenting, it is usually done in the newborn and very young infant. So you don't have any choice of too much big size stents. For we actually our cutoff point is weight of the baby. If baby is 2.5 kg or less, we use 3 millimeter diameter. But length we measure from the you have to measure the length. So it is between 12 to 18 millimeter length, and diameter is 3.5 to 4 millimeter if it is more than 2.5 kg. So it diameter depends on the weight of the baby. And then you can overdilate. If you feel that it will migrate, you measure the diameter of the PDA. If you feel that it will migrate, you can go like, there is, it is written on the balloon that how much pressure you can go. So you can go with pressure little bit more than that of the recommended one or nominal one. And just think one thing that PDA stenting procedure is actually a very critical procedure. Patient, they actually their hemodynamics become very unstable. So you must have a very good intensivist, very good ICU support, because even if you do it in the cath lab nicely, patient condition may deteriorate in the post-cath area in the ICU, and there may be thrombus formation inside the stent, or there may be too much flow and there is heart failure. So you must have a very good intensive care team. Otherwise, and you must have a very good team in the cath lab. Even if there is a migration, what to do? How will you manage if the stent migrate to pulmonary arteries? So these things you must know before taking the patient to the cath lab.
Thank you, Professor Fatima. Now I think Mazin Alvi is on the track. Mazin Alvi, would you say something? Words?
Yes, I think regarding to basically, I completely agree with what Dr. Fatima has said just now. We tend to keep the prostaglandin and then take it off, say, about 6 in the morning, because we tend to do the PDA stenting later in the day. So we can always restart if we need to, but keep it on low dose. And when you take the baby to the cath lab, bring the prostaglandin along, because in case you might need to restart in the cath lab. So I think basically we tend to agree on that part, that we should not have the PDA too big, because otherwise then there's the risk of stent migration is there. And also the stent sizes, I suppose, for PDA stenting, usually these are units, so we would not go more than 4 millimeters and 3 millimeters for those who are, say, less than 2.5 kilograms. And I think also depending on how long that we want to keep the stent for. For example, if you are doing a PDA stent, then usually you cannot put too big a stent and they have to go for surgery by about 1 year of age. So I think 4 is just nice. Usually you can take that up to about 1 year of age. So I think and what was the other one? So basically those aspects of it. Yeah, Dr. Fatima. Very nice talk. I mean, despite your unpreparedness, that you gave such a wonderful talk. Congratulations, and also congratulations for your award from the Prime Minister. A very nice picture. I wanted to ask, about Prof. Fatima, if you don't have a Melody valve and you have a calcified stenosis conduit, would you implant the stent anyway and have a pulmonary regurgitation, or you would not do it? You would ask the surgeon to replace the conduit.
Sorry, Alvi, I am not. Can you repeat?
No, I mean, you showed a nice 2 cases of Melody valve implantation.
Yeah.
So if someone has a patient with a conduit and it is stenosed, and you don't have a Melody valve, would you try to palliate with a stent across the stenosis and have pulmonary regurgitation, or you would send for surgery?
Actually,
whoever is willing to or has experience on this.
Actually, my headphone is also not with me today. I am very unprepared. That's why sound is little bit not clear. What I understand, you are asking that if there is stenosis inside the conduit, then why should not I send for surgery?
No, if you have no Melody valve.
Oh. Yeah.
Okay.
If I don't have any Melody valve, then
put a stent
I can
only
do
or surgery.
Yeah, I will. If I have no valve, then I will send for surgery, because if I place a stent only, then there will be more regurgitation, and regurgitation is more dangerous than that of the stenosis. In my practice, I feel that regurgitation is more dangerous. And I always remain anxious about the regurgitation, because the RB volume overload and the RB dysfunction, arrhythmia, these are very common with the pulmonary regurgitation in our population. And many of them, they develop arrhythmia, sudden death. So I am very worried. If I feel that I will get Melody valve in next 2 months, 3 months, then I will place the conduit, I will place the stent as a fast step procedure. Then if I get a valve in 2-3 months, then I will place the valve. But if I have no opportunity, because valve in our country is very expensive. It is 30 lakh, which is like about 30,000 US dollar. So all patients are not capable of managing money for doing it. So in that case, surgery is very cheap in
Okay.
consideration, if you consider with the bulb price. So I will send for the surgery in that case.
Okay. Thanks.
Sir, Mazin, sir. Hello, sir.
Yes.
Can you reveal?
Madam, this
sir,
is Santosh from NICBT.
Okay,
Yes.
okay, Santosh.
Okay, Madam,
Yes.
Santosh. Thank you
Yes,
very
yes.
much for
How are
your
you,
nice.
Santosh?
Okay.
Fine. Thank you very much for your nice presentation. I have a question regarding the pulmonary valve implantation.
Yes.
So, melody valve usually implant within the conduit in RBOT. Can it be
Yes.
used in native RBOT? Can it be
Yes,
used
yes.
in native RBOT?
Yes, nowadays actually people are practicing it on native RBOT also. We are not doing it. Is good to do on the good landing zone, and there are some other valves like Venus P valve, who is Dr. Nageshwar Rao. They are doing on the actually native RBOT, but Melody actually from the initial design they are planning for doing it on the conduit only. So those surgery who use conduit from the RB to pulmonary artery, only those were the candidates, and conduit dysfunction was the indication. But nowadays, actually, in some places, people are placing, but the Melody valve has some limitations. The maximum size is up to 22 millimeter, but we have seen that in top
Regarding the
repair
size.
cases, there are RBOTs like 32 millimeter, 34 millimeter. So you cannot fit a Melody in that large RBOT. So that is one of the question. And in large RBOTs, Melody valve is not suitable. In those cases, Edwards Sapien valve, they have large size. So people are doing those.
I think we'll discuss these things in another episode. We'll later with the stent, madam. Another question: how often face acute stent thrombosis? How often you face acute
stent thrombosis?
Stent, right? How you deal it?
Actually, I did many PDA cases. I could not tell you the exact figure, but I have stent thrombosis only in one case, and that was Akif. I showed you Akif. I placed another stent later on. That was only one, because we give them heparin infusion continuously. Over that, we start aspirin, and if we feel that there is chance of thrombus formation, then we add warfarin also. So sometimes we use double, triple anticoagulation if there is any risk of thrombus formation inside the stent. But I have some experience with the heart failure from overflow through the stent, and I am more worried with that than that of the less flow. Less flow we can manipulate by giving heparin and these things. But if there is excessive flow, that is very dangerous, and patient develop heart failure, pulmonary edema. And one of our patients died from pulmonary edema once in a charity mission that was done by our charity team. And then that was a very large stent they used, and after that the patient had pulmonary edema and he could not recover from that. So to me, I am very worried about the too much flow rather than the less flow. Less flow, there is many actually methods to bail out, but for the excessive flow, there is not that much way to bail out from that.
May I say something?
Right. Mazin, yes.
Yeah, regarding acute stent thrombosis, with regards to PDA stenting, it is, I wouldn't rare or uncommon, less than 0.5%, I would say. But if it occurs in the procedure itself, then it can be very, very devastating, because acute stent thrombosis, where there's no flow at all, then it can cause very severe hypoxia, bradycardia, or low blood pressure, and you really have to deal with it. So I think I had a few cases, I'm writing up 4 now in the last 4 or 5 years, in which I started using RTPA, 10 at a place, and I think in the past I've used before streptokinase, and in one occasion we had intracranial bleed in the child, so and the patient died. But I think with the 4 cases I had of the past 5 years with RTPA, that seemed to have worked well actually. But you also need to mechanically break up the thrombus with a balloon, and then while waiting for the RTPA to come from the pharmacy. So I think that is, to me, something that is very important to have. Be ready to use it if you need to, although uncommon. With regards to heart failure, I would say that most patients who come back from the cath lab with a 4 millimeter stent, they tend to have some form of overshunting, but it is not as bad as BT shunt overshunting, and normally over a few weeks, they would come down with their diuretics, and normally they would be more or less in equilibrium after about a month of PDA stenting, and then you can go for surgery towards the end of the year. But occasionally you do have, as Fatima mentioned, that overshunting can be very severe and they can cause heart failure. And the most problematic of that is NEC, necrotizing enterocolitis caused by overshunting. So I think if you have overshunting, if you think that it is very severe, you can always get the surgeon to clip the stent, and then if they have, for example, you do a critical pulmonary stenosis, the stent is too much, you can clip the stent, and that would settle the issue. So that's one issue which I have done twice, that the surgeon needed to, the surgeons have to clip the PDA stent because of too much heart failure. We cannot extubate the child from the ventilator. So those are my experiences with regard to overshunting, also as acute thrombosis.
Thank you, Majni. Abdul, can I give some comments?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much, Majni. I'm listening to you, but I can't see you. If you can open your video cam, we will be fortunate to see you.
How do I do that? Oh,
Right.
Fortunate to see you.
Can now?
Right now.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Sorry.
You now.
It's a charming face. Today, this program is essentially, I think we should dedicate to Majni only because he is a pioneer in PDS in the world. I used to follow Majni during my post-graduation days also. First, his seminal publication came in JOG, the pulmonary atresia, intact septum and PDS stenting. So I learned a lot of things from Majni through his articles and his presentations. I have two comments. One, I agree totally with Majni that acute stent thrombosis is an extremely difficult entity to manage it. We follow what you said, that we will break the thrombus first if you are in the lab. If you are outside the lab, very difficult to get the axis, then we are giving urokinase. But I want to tell you that the commonest causes for the thrombosis, number one, beyond the neonatal period, if you are taking a baby with the tortuous ductus inside the thrombus, and if you are not giving prostaglandin prior, taking directly, number one, and inappropriate stent expansion. If you expand the stent, there is a nidus for the thrombus. That's why when we are doing without prostaglandin, we are going just close to the rated burst pressure, not to the burst pressure, maybe 1 bar lesser than the burst pressure, to expand the stent fully. Then followed by, I would like to do two things. One is heparin infusion. Second, good hydration is important. If you don't give good hydration to these babies, the stent thrombosis is happening. I learned this from Majni in his talks, and also we observed, now we have done more than 100 PDA stentings. Second point, over-treating of the shunt. If you look at the data, some of the data, over-treating, what we'll do, suddenly we'll give Lasix, diuretics, furosemide we are giving. And we are giving inotropes. Don't do that. Professor Dietmar Shah from Germany, he has presented and published also very nicely. Giving diuretics is going to cause provocation towards the stent thrombus here. And if you give inotropic support or vasopressors, that will cause more shunt. So optimization of the fluid and giving beta blockers are going to help. I practiced that. I am very comfortable now that if you see that X-ray vascularity, respiratory distress, beta blockers are our first. As I agree with Majni Alvi, if it is a more flow, I think clipping should be done. I agree that. Now coming to the Dr. Fatima's one of the presentation of a case, VST pulmonary atresia, you went from the femoral artery. That is like a normal ductus. when you have a normal ductus, the pulmonary annulus, pulmonary wall is very well developed. These are the cases probably they may go for the biventricular repair. Most of the pulmonary atresia, intact septum, vertical duct, not intact septum, sorry, pulmonary atresia, VST, vertical duct, semi-vertical duct, you tend to go from the axillary, and I am the person who are going through carotid. Whereas pulmonary atresia, intact septum, we go from the femoral vein. That is the only comment I want to give.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
So Sharia, how about your experience? Can I hear your experience? Can I hear your experience on this? Dr. Sharia?
Sir, I'm very. We got little experience. We got some. I think we are still in the learning curve. That's why we are arranging these things. Along with some our friends from neighboring countries, they gone through some stenting. We have some single cases outside our institute with, but it's a very big cases. Not is enough to report it. We only go for renal stenosis. Renal stenosis, renal stenting, and we have a good outcome. This cases, 5 cases we have done through this. And sir, another question to you. I think, how about your experience vertical venous stent in obstructive TPVC? Vertical venous stent.
I have not really needed to do it because our surgeons are okay. They are good with this, and normally we accommodate these urgent cases so that we cancel the elective and do these emergency cases. So I've not done it actually. But I suppose it is a good stabilizing procedure. If you're gonna get surgery as an emergency surgery, then I think that is one option of ventilating the child for a few days before you can get them to surgery. Like Dr. Fatima said, these are important life-saving procedures if you cannot have the appropriate treatment at that point, because otherwise you will lose the child.
Regarding the vertical vein stenting, we have performed on 3 cases. We published our first case sometime 2012. It's essentially indication is very critical obstruction with the cardiac arrest, where you don't have time to send them for surgery.
Right.
Yes, sir.
So it is, when surgery is available, still it is. Once we were actually shifting to surgery, then we have to do resuscitation, then cath lab was closure, go from the left jugular, straight away it will go. But we have experience only in supracardiac TAPVR, but people have done in infradiaphragmatic TAPVR as well. But I don't recommend as a class 1 indication. It is only when surgeon is not available, you are not able to reach to the theater when baby is in sick cardiac arrest.
I just want to add something. While we do our PDA stenting, we first do the aortogram. Sometimes this aortogram is very, very confusing. We don't get very nice picture of the PDA. We actually could not calculate the length and the diameter properly. So it was happened few days ago. I was doing a PDA stenting. After aortogram, my fellows and other colleagues, they were telling that this is a very small one, use like this diameter. But I was telling that this picture is not clear. I am not happy with this. But they were actually imposing me to do the stent on those aortograms. Then I said, if you don't mind, I want to, actually that was a vertical PDA. So I want to puncture carotid artery, and I want to go through the carotid approach because I'm feeling that this is not the real picture. So they were all actually against me, but I do that. And then I found it was a actually very abnormal type of long tortuous duct from vertical arch. And it was totally different from that of the one which we found from the aortogram from the femoral artery. And it was just that I pushed the dye only through the sheath, not even through anything. So it was very close to the sheath. And then whole scenario changed and whole thing was changed. So I just want to ask Dr. Mazni how to take the aortogram for calculating the length of the PDA, especially.
If they're not usually there's the really tortuous one with multiple loops. If we see very abnormal in the echo, we would do a CT scan. And then if there are 2 tortuous, then we would just send for BT shunt. But most of the PDAs with bands and acute bands, they are stentable, and therefore I think it is important to have nice pictures before you start. So I think sometimes you need to have the catheter in the mouth of the PDA, and this is often requiring, most of this kind of requires axillary artery or carotid artery, and that is the first start. And then when you want to measure length, it's not possible to measure without having a straight. You have to imagine that it is going to be a straight tube because the stent is very, very rigid. So we would put a wire, make it straight, and sometimes 2 wires to make it straight, and then that would be the length that I would use so that it covers both the aortic end and the pulmonary artery end. So having the wire first, then do another angiogram, that would be my method of measuring how much length of stent that I need to use.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to know another thing from you. If the stent embolize, then what you do usually? Stent embolize to pulmonary artery.
No, I would not retrieve it because it's too dangerous, it's too rigid, and in a 3 kg child, is dangerous. You just leave it alone and then ask the surgeon to do BT shunt and later retrieve it. So I think it can't be retrieved. It's very, very difficult to retrieve a stent in a neonate.
Yeah.
Nages, what do you think, Nages? This issue of embolized stent.
Embolized stent, I don't think we should actually retrieve in a neonate, especially PDA dependent circulation, because if you try to pull it, it will further dissect the stent or damage, or PDA may be ruptured. I think we had, I remember this kind of complication very long time back. We left the stent and we did as you said that. But I had a catastrophic complication which I have shown in Vietnam last before year. Duct got ruptured when we are doing that. Duct dissection, thrombosis and rupture. We did not get a time. We tried to resuscitate, put the wire, gave all those things, but we lost the baby.
I see.
I think you have seen that case when I was presenting.
I can remember that. Yeah. That is very, you say that kind of complication is scary because we don't have
in terms of measurement, what I actually followed one of the technique, you have polyline technique, you can take polylines and then do it. Or we have a lot of old coronary balloons which are sterilized and kept. I take a balloon approximating to that duct length, put that balloon and then give injection. So that gives a fairly good idea, but I am afraid to tell it. This is not scientific. This is totally unscientific. But what I practice, I am telling you, we put the old balloon, don't inflate and all, just put the old balloon, give contrast, then you will get the idea of what length of stent which you should take.
Yeah, this is good technique, but what Dr. Mazni said, 2-wire method, I think that is also, if we place 2-wire across the PDA, then it will straighten and we can get a real idea about the length. Thank you.
The other thing is that in tortuous ductus, quite often, if the band is near the aorta, you will need to put 2 stents in that part. Although you cover with 1 stent, but to prevent to prevent the PDA uncoiling again, not become straight, then you need to reinforce with the second stent. Because once remove the wire and then the PDA gains its former shape and then the stent becomes not long enough. So I've had that kind of problem before, and I think whenever I see acute bands at the aortic end, I would put straight away 2 stents to reinforce it.
Okay, about the type of the stent, materials, which materials you prefer for the PDA? PDA stenting.
We use the coronary stents, which is normally cobalt chromium. So, and in the past, I've been using non-drug eluting, but now with the data from Toronto showing that the levels of paclitaxel is acceptable in neonates, so I'm beginning to use drug eluting. But I've done, I was doing a study for the iron stent from Lifetech. So I used 9 cases over a period of 1 year. So, but I think we need to be careful because I'm not very sure because this is non-dry eluting. Therefore, there's a problem with a very more aggressive instant stenosis from neo-intimal hyperplasia. So I would use it only for those with, for example, critical PS and they need stenting, then it's okay. But if it is pulmonary atresia, which you cannot open the valves, then I'll be worried because they will need to come back earlier because of the stent becomes inadequate. So I think that is my only thing. So I'm not very sure if we have dry eluting with the iron stent, that might be better in the long run. Still very early days.
Yeah.
So just wrapping it up.
Thank you, Dr. Mazni. You have. I just want to know one more thing from you. You have vast experience on the PDA stenting. Actually, since my very early life of my pediatric cardiology, I am seeing you doing stenting. I first saw you in 2006 in Thailand, and you were talking about the PDA stent at that time also. So about the PDA stent, it is not a permanent palliation or something. So this patient ultimately will go for the surgery. So what is your aim? How long you want to stay with this stent? Durability,
but I think this is very surgeon dependent. I think if you have a surgeon who's experienced, and I think it's important that we work very well with the surgeon, so that you need to get them familiar how to deal with the stent during repairs. So usually our surgeons, they are comfortable stay at about 9 months onwards for the repair. This is talking about, for example, Rastelli operations. But if the patient needs, for example, a longer palliation, for example, they will need for Rastelli sending in corrected transposition, then the stent will not last long enough generally. So therefore, these are better dealt with by a PT shunt. So that would be my usual. And then if you have patients who are for single ventricle for Fontan surgery, if they have branch PA stenosis, then also something that we need to be cautious because we don't want to jeopardize the patient's long-term outcome by causing small branch PAs, which is not good for Fontan patients. So these are things that I tend to be a bit cautious with regards to PDA stenting. But for 2 ventricle, it's not as bad because we can deal with it and we can stent the pulmonary arteries later, but not with a Fontan patient.
Dr. Nadeni, one question from the audience. What are the precautions we should take to avoid spell in alveolar stenting?
Usually these patients are on propranolol already. Sometimes we give them IV from time to time. Therefore, I'm not really sure whether there's anything more you can do. I think you have to go quickly and do the stent. Morphine, they're on morphine, intubated, GA, beta blockers. And the rest of it is we pray to God and we do it.
Yeah, I agree with you that we intubate and give ketamine preferably. Try to avoid propofol in this patient. The spell will not be recovered at all. And try to avoid giving dobutamine and dopamine heavily.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So intubate the child, give good volume, and try to give ketamine. Usually, it will be you will have stability. But still, I agree with Madni that you have to pray God, Allah.
Okay. Nagesha, I have a question for you. You already answered the partial answer. We will choose retrograde or antegrade or jugular approach. What is it subjective, or what is your plan when you go for stenting? Retrograde or antegrade approach or jugular approach?
Which stent?
For stenting, PDA stenting, you retrograde or antegrade? Right.
PDA stenting, we have all methods. I do all methods.
Yeah.
If you have a vertical ductus coming from the undersurface of the arch, I prefer right axillary artery. We used to do left axillary artery, but I am not comfortable because the working length is very difficult and the working environment is difficult. I used to do PDA stenting from the carotid if you want to put 2 wires and stents earlier, even I remember that Madini, we wanted to do one study that particular time. Now we are actually doing very less often. Femoral arterial approach we do predominantly when we perforate the pulmonary valve or PAIVS where the duct is oriented towards the descending aorta, then we do that.
Yeah.
We have some occasions, not always, going from femoral vein, crossing the
Yeah.
VST, and then ascending aorta, putting indirect duct. You have a left aortic arch, but duct is arising from the base of the innominate artery to pulmonary artery. Indirect duct, where your right coronary guide catheter will go and hook like this. But remember that when you are doing this procedure, there will be transient bradycardia, hypertension you may encounter. So that is the problem. And cannulation also, we may damage the ductus. So we should be careful and we should be aware of that.
Yeah, I just want to add with Dr. Nageshwar that for the vertical PDA from the arch, we also use cut pigtail and like an inverted J shape, and you can actually cut the pigtail from the front few centimeter and then you can use that. And I think everyone use like this for the vertical one, and this can catch there in the PDA.
Can I have one comment? One comment on this. I think I'm not good at it. So normally nowadays sometimes I'll ask my intensivist to do ultrasound guided carotid puncture. So I think that is a good way of accessing the PDA in a vertical duct sometimes. I think something that probably is worthwhile having someone learn it, the skill of ultrasound guided carotid artery cannulation. I think this has been published about 4 years ago by the team from Texas, but I've not seen any other publications, big ones after that. But something that I think many people now are comfortable of getting access, another source of good access for PDA stenting in neonates. What do you think, Fatima? You have done your carotid puncture for PDA stenting. Were you comfortable with it, with the procedure?
Yes, yeah, madam. Question for you.
Question, can you please repeat? Sound is very bad here.
Are you comfortable with the carotid? Going to carotid
Yes,
stent?
yes, I am comfortable with the carotid, axillary, and femoral vein, femoral artery. Actually, we actually depend on the situation. We do what situation demands. Sometimes we try to do from the femoral vein, then we fail to engage. Then we go through the axillary artery. Sometimes we go through carotid artery. Even through femoral vein, as Dr. Nageshwar Rao mentioned, through the BSD. But that one is actually a little bit dangerous because as we go through the heart, so there is hemodynamic instability and we need to take care of them. But sometimes we do like that also. So actually whatever situation demands, there are excesses and there are various types of anatomies. So when we intend to do something, we try to do that in spite of any cost. We use every ways until we succeed and until we do it safely.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I want to add to that, I think the rest are okay, but carotid, I think to do it blindly without ultrasound guided might be a problem in terms of safety.
Yeah.
I think if you have a major bleed in the carotid area, that might be difficult.
Yeah.
So I think the best thing is
we have ultrasound also.
I think that would be the best.
We have vessel illuminator also. So there is a vessel illuminator. If we put it on the neck, it can show the vessel, and there is ultrasound also.
Okay.
That's
So I think, sir, good evening.
Okay.
Good evening, sir. This is Dr. Rizwana.
Yeah.
We have got some experience. We did more than 100 PDA stenting.
Wow.
So I am very inspired from your papers, especially axillary access. When we started doing axillary access, I took lot of tips and tricks from your axillary artery this thing. So initially, when we started PDA stenting, we use femoral artery and then that femoral venous this thing. Then nowadays with vertical tortuous PDA, we use directly axillary artery access, right axillary artery. So my question to you is, like older children, like 4 months, 5 months old, like pulmonary atresia, ventricular septal defect, vertical PDA. For those patients, do you have any special, like one patient we failed at 4 months, 5 months age child, that PDA was very constricted and we could not, we could pass the wear, but we could not, the stent could not be positioned. So we have to. So is there any tips for us for these?
I think if you are working in a hospital where there are adult cardiologists, they have a lot of balloons. So if it is very constricted, I would balloon first with a 2 millimeters, 2.5, then go with a stent.
Yeah, we have.
You have?
Yeah, I did ballooning. Still, we could not negotiate the stent. The wear was passing nicely, but we could not negotiate the stent. That was the problem with a 4 months child.
Is it because the PDA was very tortuous? Is that the reason?
Yeah, it was a bit tortuous.
I see. So in that case, even with the wire, you cannot make the PDA straight with the wire. I see.
You can use double wire in that case. Double wire.
Yes,
double wire to get more support in tortuous PDAs.
Okay. Which we use in our coronary cases, body wire.
These are the experts.
We do the possible very nicely.
Yes, you get that, Dr. Rizwana? I think the adult cardiologists are very good at this. They have all kinds of wires.
Okay,
from the very floppy to the stiffer wire, they have everything.
I like to have a comment entering today's program. In the morning, I asked to one of adult cardiologist topic, doctor, this has been given today. Do you have any idea about this? So no, I do not know anything regarding stent therapy in pediatric cardiology or something else. And today I have seen. Before this, I have another. I attended another program of Professor Nurnar Fatima, and in that day, she showed about 100 of cases of different modalities, and her work is excellent. And I have an urge to tell her that please help my institute with the help of Abdullah Shahriar and Ataul and others, and you make my institute as institute. This is
thank you. If you invite me to come, I will come, no problem. I am very eager to teach people.
Your door is open now.
Yeah, my door is always open.
Right. So, ma'am, I think we have much more things to learn from you. This time is, I think, running 5:30. I think many things we can discuss. Still, I think I have to cut up the session, if you permit. And I now ask you, the chairperson, to tell something. And before going to request my chairperson, I thank to Beximco to arrange such a webinar. Thanks to all the authorities that are concerned about things. Now, sir, I please ask Dr. Professor Mir Jamaluddin to something and to conclude the session, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Shahriar. I am delighted to attend this program today by your request, and I have become able to learn many things which I did not know previously. And you are doing so much work in the field of pediatric interventional cardiology. Particularly, I am very much proud of our Professor Nurnar Fatima, who is doing her brilliant jobs in the field of pediatric cardiology, as well as another mission so far I think she has, helping the poor peoples. and without any fee. So far I know, without any cost, she has arranged different types of procedures that she herself arranged, and that is why she is our asset, and she is the award, highest award of the country she received from my Prime Minister. So we are grateful to her for doing work in this, and we are praying to God, Allah, that she will go further up and will trained up in the field of interventional cardiology. All the fellows, not only the army fellows, non-army fellows, my request,
Everyone.
younger brother, my faculty, that is in NICBD pediatric cardiology. So I request you to help them to evaluate, to raise the nation, to raise the institute. And I am very much grateful to the foreign faculties. They have given a very good idea on different topics and their comments. And so I am also grateful to them. And Dr. Abdullah Shahriar, by his endeavor, this program has been arranged and is completed very nicely. So I congratulate all and thank you all, and giving declaration of closing the session. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nagesh sir. Thank you, Mazin.
Thank you,
Thank you, Shahriar.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam.